Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's IMC webinar. I'm Hélène, and I'm delighted to be your host today. At IMC, the International Mentoring Center, we are passionate about empowering professionals through mentoring, leadership development, and community building. Our mission is to create transformative experiences that help individuals and organizations thrive by sharing stories, skills, and support. We believe in the power of authentic connection and learning from one another, and that's exactly what today's session is about. We are honored to welcome our speakers today, Jane Ayaduray. Jane is an experienced leader with a strong track record in diversity, equity, and inclusion. She has successfully led teams and delivering impactful strategies and worked closely with senior leadership to advance diversity goals and improve the representation of historically underrepresented groups. Her deep expertise in inclusive leadership and organizational development makes her the perfect voice to guide today's conversation, mentoring across difference. Before we begin, just a quick note. Today's session will run for about 60 minutes. You are welcome to submit your question via the chat or Q&A. And the session is being recorded, and the link will be shared with you by email afterwards. And now I'm pleased to hand over the virtual floor to Jane Ayaduray. Jane, welcome.
Thank you so much, Helene. I really appreciate it. As Helene said, my name's Jane Ayaduray. I'm the Global Director of Diversity and Inclusion at a law firm. And I've been working in the D&I space for 15 or so years now, in a number of different types of people leadership roles. I do the majority of my mentoring informally, so it's typically people who are keen to join the D&I profession, although I would have to say in the last few months, a few less of those, but also those who are new to the organisation and really want to understand how to navigate our systems and structures and really what it takes to thrive. But in addition to that, I run a number of programs on a global basis, which look at mentoring, coaching, and sponsorship. So I have the opportunity to hear both from our awesome mentors and our really talented mentees about really what helps make mentoring relationships thrive. So I'm really excited to be able to share that information with you all today. At the heart of mentoring relationships is difference. People come to us as mentors, or we seek out mentors because they have something different to what we have ourselves. And so it might be curious to you that we're running a session specifically around mentoring across difference, where that sits at the heart of the mentoring relationship. Helene, can I just check? Can everybody see my slides?
Yes, absolutely. I can see your slides.
Wonderful. Success so far. So what I'd love to do to begin with is to really begin by understanding a little bit more about why people seek you out as a mentor. Now, if you're a mentee or a coach, just flip the script to make it work for you in your context. What I'm keen for us to do is use the chat functionality quite a bit. If you've got questions or comments, please throw them into the chat. Or if you'd like to speak, if you wouldn't mind just giving me a wave, put your hand up so I can call on you. But to begin with, I'd just really like to understand a bit more about who we've got in the room today. Why do people seek you out as a mentor? Is it because of your seniority? Is it your experience in a role or a function or industry? Is it your domain knowledge, your subject matter expertise? Or is it something less tangible, like your network or contacts, or your reputation and credentials? Or is it something else entirely? In the chat box, please write the number or the numbers of the reasons why people typically seek you out. Is it, for example, if you said mentoring and network and contacts, you just write 1 and 6. And if it's something that isn't on the list, so number 8, and you feel comfortable doing so, I'd love you to share that with me as well. So just into the chat box, please. Wonderful. Okay, so we're hearing experience, domain knowledge, subject matter expertise, reputation and credentials. Thank you, Kendra. Hello, role and function and domain knowledge and expertise. Wonderful. Domain knowledge expertise. Yeah, I found for myself it's often that. That's why people reach out to me, is because I know something in my field that they're really keen to understand more about. Lovely. 5, domain knowledge expertise. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So there are other reasons why people might seek us out as mentors. And looking at this list, here are some of the other reasons why people may not be as commonly discussed. The reasons on the previous slide come up pretty frequently, and that's where a lot of the information and the research lies. But there are underlying reasons, and these are more my areas of expertise. why somebody might seek you out as a mentor. So to your knowledge, again, in the chat box, how many of these are primary reasons why somebody is seeking you out? And when I say a primary reason, it's the key driver. So for example, with age, are they seeking you out because you're in a certain age group, or are they seeking you out because you have seniority and therefore you have more experience and therefore you've achieved a certain age? So what I'm looking for here is where they seek you out specifically because of your age or gender or culture or socioeconomic background. And once again, if you could just write those in the chat, but this time there's no need to indicate which ones they are, just the number. So 0, 1, 2, 3, whatever that might be. And it's okay if you don't know. Mentees themselves, one may not share the information with us in terms of their decision making about who would make a great mentor for them. Or indeed, sometimes they're not even fully aware that this has been part of their decision-making process. But I'd love to know if there are any of these reasons why people seek you out. And again, 0 is the right answer, as is 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Right, so people seeking you out because of your age, some mentioned culture. Also, there's some here that have a number of reasons why people might be seeking you out across a number of different backgrounds. Great. So what we see here is both the opportunity for people to come to us because we hold something often intellectually in terms of our knowledge or our experience, or something that we hold very personally in terms of our identity. Staying with this list, I'd like to hear now a little bit about maybe the people or the person that you mentor the most. And if you're not currently mentoring somebody, or indeed if you're being mentored by somebody or coaching somebody, what are the most common points of difference? Are they most commonly around gender, most commonly around age, most commonly around disability, for example, that you're aware of? So again, with your mentee, they may not have shared this information with you. Sometimes it's fairly apparent. Age, gender, sometimes culture can be quite obvious. Other things like disability, socioeconomic background may not be. So age, yep. And that's a fairly common one, I think, where it comes to mentoring because of the experience or the seniority that mentors have. Age comes up quite a lot. Gender also comes up a lot, particularly in organizations where we're looking at professions where women are historically underrepresented. So many of them, I work typically in banking and law. A lot of women will find themselves with male mentors because there aren't an awful lot of female mentors at the end of the day. Thank you. As I said, it's okay not to know this information. There can be things about your mentee that they haven't shared with you. Now, that may come to light in the fullness of time. It may be something they just don't feel is particularly relevant, and that's okay too. I think the opportunity as a mentor is to understand that differences can arise, even if you don't really know what they are, and be really supportive and inclusive around your mentoring practice and how you support your mentees. There's a great quote by Marian Wright Edelman, which is, "You can't be what you can't see." And it's relevant for lots of diverse aspiring leaders who seek mentoring because they're often wanting to be matched with somebody who's walked that path before, somebody who they see as being like them, who will understand their experience and can really show them in a very practical way the way forward. So, for example, many aspiring women leaders who I work with seek mentoring from other women who have already achieved the level that they're looking to. The challenge here can be there's not all that many women who have necessarily achieved that. And that can be based on the specific area that they're working in. It could even be based on the company that they're in or the industry. It can be based on the country. So there can be a number of reasons for that to be the case. But there can also be other factors. And particularly in situations where there aren't many women who have achieved those levels, those women may not have capacity to take on any more mentees. They might also not be the ideal mentors. We'd love to think that anybody could be a great mentor, but that's absolutely not the case. And part of the reason why organizations like IMC are here is to really improve the skills and capabilities of mentors, because on the surface it can seem very easy, but there can be an awful lot that goes behind it to make it genuinely impactful. But the challenge can be, if you're managing or working with a diverse mentee, is they may feel that mentoring relationship isn't quite the perfect solution they were looking for. And that's absolutely no reflection on you as a mentor. That's very much about the individual identity characteristics that they hold personally, that they were hoping to be able to match as well. So some additional considerations when working with diverse mentees. They often seek mentors who share their identity characteristics for several reasons. And the first is around validation. So they're really looking for somebody who sees the struggle, if you like, who understands their perspective and has had similar experiences in the organization to what they have. The second is around psychological safety. And this comes up a lot, particularly where people have either had bad experiences in the past or where they are one of quite a small minority. So that feeling that actually they could be judged for what they're saying, or that they have issues or concerns about how maybe something's happening in the organization, it's okay to say that, and it's okay not to feel fully bought into something. So that sense of safety and comfort and confidence is something that they'll often seek where they feel it's related to an identity characteristic. So their age, their gender, their sexual orientation, for example. There's also a wider piece around understanding the context. So somebody who genuinely gets it. For example, we know from research that women get interrupted 2.6 times more than men in business meetings. And for women judges, it's 4 times more than male judges. And that's just a really important piece to keep in mind, that if you've never been in that situation, if you've never experienced that or not experienced it to the extent that somebody else has, bringing in all that information can be challenging. There's also a piece around the fuller context, things that go outside of the workplace or maybe that aren't directly related to somebody's career or career aspirations, but that does affect the way that they are experiencing work and life. So, for example, we know socially and culturally, often the domestic responsibilities in the household sit with women. Now, that's absolutely not always the case, and it's absolutely not to say that men don't do that work as well. But for a woman who is balancing doing laundry, taking care of elderly parents, taking care of children, and an aspiring leadership role, having somebody who understands all of those different drivers and all of those different pulls on her time and resources can be something that she's seeking out in a mentor and that she feels will be impactful for her. And just as an aside, I'll generally be referencing gender today for a couple of reasons. Firstly, there's a lot of research in the gender space around careers, mentoring, and advancement for women. So it's an easy one to reference. Secondly, people generally have had an experience, whether it's mentoring or another type of senior relationship with somebody from a different gender. So even if it's not the specific points of difference that you're experiencing with your mentee, there's still relevance to it, and it's still something that hopefully you'll feel is quite relatable to your experience. And lastly, gender is a very broad-based topic. It covers so many different things that it's generally applicable to other types of diversity, which is not so the case with other topics, say, for example, disability and LGBTQ+, where some of the issues that may come up are much more niche. And therefore, if I was talking about those, but you aren't mentoring somebody with one of those lived experiences, it wouldn't necessarily feel as relevant or applicable. But that's not to say that these issues and topics don't come up across the board. I would also say that in the conversation today, I am talking about gender as men and women. I do acknowledge that there are other people identified differently. And this is more, as anything else, as a shortcut and not to invalidate their experience or the lives that they live. So just a note on that. Right, back to the list, depth of relationship. So the Centre for Talent and Innovation, CTI, did some research, probably about 10 years ago now, on how male leaders perceived their relationship with female subordinates and vice versa. And what they found is that male leaders perceived the relationship to be closer and more trusting than the female subordinate felt. And this was further heightened if the male leader was white and the female leader was black. Sorry, the male leader was white and the female subordinate was black. So mentees can be looking to close that perception gap in terms of how that relationship will feel. So how much trust will be in that. And again, that's no reflection on you. It's no reflection on the actual relationship you have with your mentee. It's very much about their view of overall relationships with people in power or people of a higher status that they perceive to be. And the final one is really around role model. People from diverse backgrounds are often looking for somebody in very practical ways to show them the path, to demonstrate to them how they can take those steps in terms of the next step in their career or broadening their network or understanding the industry or whatever reason it is that they've reached out to you for mentoring. They're looking for something very practical, very specific. They want to be shown the way, often because they're not seeing it. So back to the earlier quote, you can't be what you can't see. If they can't see it, they're looking for somebody to show it to them. So they want that visible demonstration. And so again, it's not about the relationship they have with you, but if these things are missing, they may feel that it's not the perfect matching that they were hoping for. The session today looks at a number of different things, and I just wanted to link these back quickly with the IMC principles. And I see that it fits basically within all of them. I'm pretty good at making sure everything relates to D&I in some way, shape, or form. But the four that I feel it's the most directly applicable to are the mindset for continuous learning and development, effective communication, relationship building and maintenance, and organizational integration and advocacy. Now, on to the next section, which is really around the challenges and opportunities. I just wanted to check if there are any questions or anything that people aren't sure of so far. Just drop a note into the chat box if that's the case. Or pop your hand up. That looks like everybody's doing okay. Wonderful. All right.
Yes, I think we can.
So, I'm seeing some thumbs up. Thank you very much. That's helpful. And so looking at some of the challenges around mentoring across difference, one of the first ones, and I think probably one of the ones that stands out as being the most apparent, is understanding and navigating bias. And that's one of the challenges around mentoring across difference. In fact, any relationship, but heightened where there is a difference in that relationship. And it's important that we can recognize both our own biases as well as the biases of our mentees, as well as the wider organizational industry or even the community that might be coming into play. I'm going to ask Helene to show a short clip from a TED Talk called The Career Advice You Probably Didn't Get by Susan Colantuono, which I think demonstrates this really nicely. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to you, Helene.
Thank you, Jane. So I'm going to share my screen now, and we're going to watch the video from 8:47. Can you see my screen? Yes.
Now, Tonya also talked about working with a mentor. And this is really important to talk about, because if organizations' talent and performance systems aren't giving people in general information about the importance of business, strategic, and financial acumen, how are men getting to the top? Well, there are primarily two ways. One is because of the positions they're guided into, and the other is because of informal mentoring and sponsorship. So what's women's experience as it relates to mentoring? Well, this comment from an executive that I worked with recently illustrates that experience. He was very proud of the fact that last year he had two proteges, a man and a woman. And he said, I helped the woman build confidence. I helped the man learn the business. And I didn't realize that I was treating them any differently. And he was sincere about that. So what this illustrates is that as managers, whether we're women or men, we have mindsets about women and men, about careers and leadership. And these unexamined mindsets won't close the gender gap at the top.
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Helene. I will take the screen back. Thank you. So what we see here is a leader who's obviously very committed to his mentees, really wants to ensure he supports them and is focused on doing the right thing.
Jane, we can
his bias.
We can see your notes now. Can you click
see the notes?
Yes. Can you share it again and click on slideshow?
I'm sorry, everyone.
It's okay. It's technology.
Sorry. 5 years in from being predominantly technology based, and this is where we are.
Yes. And if you can click on slideshow, perfect. Yeah, that's perfect.
There we go. All right. So as I was saying, we have a leader who's really wanting to do the right thing, very committed, obviously, to his mentees and supporting them on their journey, and hadn't recognized or realized that he was treating them differently. I really love the point that Susan makes about the unexamined mindsets. So there's nothing deliberate in there about it. He hadn't taken the time or realized that he needed to think differently or more deeply about this. And that goes for all of us, particularly where there's things which may be driven a lot by general societal or cultural norms. So understanding and recognizing bias is one of the key ways of being able to address it. If you haven't already, I would suggest looking into the Harvard Implicit Associations test. They are a series of short, free online tests, which really look at the speed of reaction to different words or pictures that show how much thinking we need to do to make a decision. With the view being, if we're not thinking about it in any great depth, we're making very quick decisions, and that shows we have a predisposition or a bias towards something. Whereas if we're having to think more deeply about it, there's generally less bias because we're making a very conscious or deliberative decision. And it is important to remember that bias can be both positive and negative. For example, I have a bias towards people who speak multiple languages. I just think it's so impressive that if you ever want to get ahead with me, just tell me how many languages you speak, and we're pretty much done, because I am completely English only, a few words of other things. But it's as important for me to recognize that I would view somebody who speaks multiple languages much more positively because they speak multiple languages than necessarily for any reason which may be related to their job or their experience, which helps them be successful at work. So that's an important consideration. Other challenges that can come up with mentoring across difference: bridging the communication gap. And difference in cultural norms, generational expectations, and communication styles can sometimes lead to misunderstandings and communication gaps. And this can be as simple as using words in different ways. So the same word, different meaning, or different context around it, different connotation. Or it can be back to that piece that we were talking about depth of relationship. So there could be a situation where somebody doesn't feel that they can be as open with you or as forthcoming because they're just not sure how that will be perceived. Whereas as a mentor, you may feel that absolutely that trust is there. So often it's about putting a little bit more effort, a little bit more time into building both the trust, but getting clear on what good communication looks like within your mentoring relationship. Balancing authority and humility. And I think this is a really important one, because people come to us as mentors because they want the information or the knowledge or the experience that we have. And that's something that puts us in a bit of an authority position, even if we don't feel particularly authoritative. But we need to balance that with the fact that we ourselves are on a learning journey. And even if your mentoring program or approach doesn't specifically look at it being a two-way exchange or a partnership, I would really encourage you, when you're mentoring somebody who is different from yourself, to seek out, what are those opportunities for you to learn? Where can you be thinking about the learning journey that you're on? How can you grow through that relationship as well? And it's getting that right balance so that they feel that they can still come to you as a mentor, and that the questions that you ask or the learning that you're doing doesn't negatively affect the way that they feel about the relationship or the confidence they have in you and in your mentoring. Building trust across difference. And again, this goes back to the piece around the depth of relationship and potentially that feeling that there is a difference in the relationship that may be more apparent for your diverse mentees. And it can take longer to establish that trust. And it can be due to preconceptions, it can be due to hesitations. And so consistency, transparency, and active engagement can really make a difference in overcoming that. There's also a piece about addressing implicit expectations. So people will come to mentoring for different reasons, and they'll have different expectations on what it means to be a mentor and what it means to be a mentee. And these are quite often unspoken and sometimes not even fully recognized, particularly if there's cultural or social norms that are in play. So having open dialogue about what's expected, what you're comfortable with in terms of information sharing, what you're looking for, and being able to be quite open and upfront about what makes a great mentoring relationship for you will help really make sure that there aren't too many unaddressed expectations. But I'd love to hear from the group. Are there any other challenges that you've come across that you'd like to share? Just pop them in the chat box. And please do add them into the chat box. I will keep an eye on that. But I'd love to move on now to mentoring opportunities that come with that mentoring across difference. And the first one is really the learning and the insights that you gain from that relationship with somebody who is very different from yourself. And I think this is particularly apparent at a senior level where it may not be something which on a day-to-day basis you have a great deal of insight or a great deal of contact with the wider organization. It comes with seniority and leadership, as often your time shrinks. So you can lose a little bit of sight on what everything looks like on a day-to-day basis for people across the organization. Your mentoring relationship can give you fantastic windows and perspectives on that you wouldn't otherwise have. And so you get the opportunity to really understand the organizational culture in a way that probably a lot of your peers don't have because their groups have shrunk, or they may be hearing the information second or third hand through, their one downs or their next level. This gives you a much more direct insight, and particularly where you're looking across difference, whether that be gender, race and ethnicity, religion, culture, socioeconomic background, or it could be multiple of these factors. The opportunity for you to really understand how are things landing. We talk about the organization's values or the mission. Does that mean the same thing that we think it means at a leadership level for everybody else in the organization? And not just broadly, but for particular groups who we care about. It's also a wonderful opportunity to demonstrate leadership. So due to the fact that you are doing this mentoring across difference, it shows a way that you can be very practical at a leadership level in supporting the talent pipeline and the diversity of the talent pipeline. One of the challenges that often comes up is a mentee may share information with you that you think is an opportunity for the organization to address. And being able to then demonstrate the leadership of recognizing and understanding that there's a problem and doing something about it is also really significant. And there's the opportunity to provide context and insight. So really filling in the blanks for people. I often hear how it's not the formal structures that trip people up, but it's the informal, the unspoken ones that people can have difficulty navigating. And that's particularly the case for people from underrepresented groups. And these are the situations that people may not even know are there, but sometimes, or some people seem to be able to navigate them well and to thrive, and others don't. And that's often due to informal networks that they have, which we know are often less common or happen less organically for people from underrepresented groups. So Helene, I'm going to ask you again to share a video. This is from the same TED Talk, but looking at a little more detail around how we can help navigate those situations. I'll stop sharing.
I'm going to share my screen now. Can you see my screen? Yes. So 3.
In seeking and identifying employees with high potential, the potential to go to the top of organizations, the skills and competencies that relate to that green box are rated twice as heavily as those in the other two elements of leadership. These skills and competencies can be summarized as business, strategic, and financial acumen. In other words, this skill set has to do with understanding where the organization is going, what its strategy is, what financial targets it has in place, and understanding your role in moving the organization forward. This is that missing 33% of the career success equation for women, not because it's missing in our capabilities or abilities, but because it's missing in the advice that we're given. Here's what I mean by that. 5 years ago, I was asked to moderate a panel of executives, and the topic for the evening was, what do you look for in high potential employees? So think about the 3 elements of leadership as I summarize for you what they told me. They said, we look for people who are smart and hardworking and committed and trustworthy and resilient. So which element of leadership does that relate to? Personal greatness. They said, we look for employees who are great with our customers, who empower their teams, who negotiate effectively, who are able to manage conflict well, and are overall great communicators. Which element of leadership does that equate to? Engaging the greatness in others. And then they pretty much stopped. So I asked, well, what about people who understand your business, where it's going, and their role in taking it there? And what about people who are able to scan the external environment, identify risks and opportunities, make strategy or make strategic recommendations? And what about people who are able to look at the financials of your business, understand the story that the financials tell, and either take appropriate action or make appropriate recommendations? And to a man, they said, that's a given. So I turned to the audience of 150 women and I asked, how many of you have ever been told that the door opener for career advancement is your business, strategic, and financial acumen, and that all the other important stuff is what differentiates you in the talent pool? 3 women raised their hand. And I've asked this question of women all around the globe in the 5 years since, and the percentage is never much different.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Thanks, Celine. I will take that back and let's see if I do a better job this time of the technology.
Yes.
On track to get this right first time, hopefully.
Yes, you just need to click on perfect. Perfect. Yeah.
There we go. Right. So that video is about 10 years old now, but I think it's actually a really powerful one and would certainly recommend that you check it out. It's the career advice you probably weren't given. There's lots of great nuggets in there. I think what it really demonstrates, gosh, sorry, what's happening there? What this really demonstrates is how challenging it can be for people if they're not getting the insights. And obviously there's a group of leaders, as demonstrated in this video, who have this very specific and clear view on what's expected and what's required. And they're making an assumption that everybody knows that. Where people have informal mentors, or they have the informal networks, they're probably getting that information. Where they don't, they're not. And so while we certainly hope that these situations change and evolve, chances are there's going to be situations where you as a mentor have the opportunity to help somebody fill in the blanks or translate the organization in a way that's really meaningful and impactful for them. So I'd love to hear in the chat again, what are some of the other opportunities that you have come up against or with in terms of mentoring across difference? And while you do that, I really just wanted to say thank you to Abdel, I think it is, and Al for their responses. Abdel Adam mentioned the challenge of ensuring continuity and develop organizational and emotional intelligence as being some of the challenges that come with mentoring across difference. And Al mentioned cross-cultural differences, both hugely valid and I think really insightful to be able to identify those. Thank you. So moving on now in terms of the opportunities that come, with supporting, yes, the opportunities that come with supporting diverse mentees. One of the areas that we've talked a lot about has been, that trust relationship and how impactful that can be for mentees. One of the ways to do that, one of the ways to really show them that you are somebody they can support them in all of their life, so you understand and recognize the difference in the identity characteristics, but also where you share those, is to validate their experience, to recognize that their experience is and will be different from yours and that you haven't walked their path. And that doesn't invalidate any of your experience or knowledge either, but it's that recognition that they will come to this from a different perspective and background. Key to helping that is asking how things land. So check in with how your guidance or advice lands with them in their reality. Accept what might seem like a straightforward or very simple response or answer for you might not be straightforward or simple for them. So for example, the example I gave earlier, if you are saying to somebody, you just need to speak up more in meetings, but you're mentoring a junior woman who gets interrupted 2.6 times more than her male counterparts, her context and her reality is going to look quite different. So this then leads on to co-creating the solution. So one, being open to the fact that there will be some differences and that the solutions that you have may not be the fully baked version. They may need further work to make them relevant and appropriate for your mentee, is actually partnering with them on that. Being a safe space for them to try things out and to give feedback. And that giving feedback, I think, is really important because particularly if you're in a senior level or if you've been with an organization for a while, you'll know an awful lot about what works within the organization. And so, for example, staying with the example of if you're mentoring a junior woman, if she's saying, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and you know that there's a very specific way that a particular male leader likes to be approached or have topics discussed with him, it's really important that you're giving her that feedback. Or it's really important if there's organizational dynamics that would mean it's going to land differently from her than for somebody else, that you help her understand that. That's not to say that that's right, that's going to land differently. And it's really important, this validation piece, that you understand, experience, and knowledge that it shouldn't be the case. She shouldn't be interrupted more than others. It's not right. But the reality is she's going to be. So how does she address that? How can you help her with that? Another way you can help support diverse mentees is to open up your network for them. Knowing that there may be something that your mentee would be keen to understand or explore more, is there somebody you know who is at a peer level to you, either within your own organization or within another organization, who you could connect them with? So, for example, you're mentoring a junior woman lawyer who's keen to start a family. You might say to her, I know you're really keen to start a family. I know a fantastic general counsel in another firm who has a young family. Would you like me to introduce you to her if she's open to a conversation about her experience? This is not you handing over the mentoring relationship. This is not you stepping away from any of your responsibilities as a mentor. It is very much you opening up your network and your experience and your credentials, your equity, if you like, as a mentor to your mentee. So that can be incredibly powerful. And the last one is really helping without taking away agency. And I see this as being an area that a lot of our really senior mentors get challenged with, because they'll hear something that they want to do something about. And so they want to dive in and do it. But that's not always the right answer. And your role as a mentor isn't necessarily going to be to fix things for the mentee. What you can do here, though, is be very much offering to help or having a conversation about what's going to be the most helpful for her. And it could be that, in the example that she's going to go and talk to another leader about a particular topic, giving her the opportunity to practice. Or the answer might be, if she's coming up against a real challenge within the organization, for example, she's not getting enough performance feedback, that's something that you don't need to make about her, but that you could take away and still address. So, for example, we know from research that men typically get higher quality and more performance feedback than women. So you could take that research to your leadership team and say, hey, look, here's some interesting research that means we're not giving our fantastic women the same kind of feedback and performance updates that we are our men. What do we do about it? So it doesn't have to be specifically about your mentee, particularly if you're taking it back to a wider group, to still be impactful and make a difference within the organization. What is really important, though, if you're doing anything that specifically relates to your mentee, that you've discussed and agreed it with them first. And certainly if you're sharing their experience at all, that she's aware of that and she's agreed to it. So related to that is really how do we move beyond purely mentoring to being a more inclusive leader or driving greater inclusion within our organizations? I was really quite surprised with the research from HBR, Harvard Business Review, that 71% of executives typically mentor employees who share their race or gender. So we've been focusing a lot on this, the individual personal relationship between mentors and mentees. But I think this really highlights the impact that we can have as mentors by mentoring across difference, because it really recognizes the fact that actually there is a mismatch, or there is potentially a dynamic that means that our diverse or underrepresented talent aren't getting the same mentoring opportunities that others are. So I think that that's super important, is to recognize that there is that gap. There's another opportunity really around how we test and incubate ideas. So things that may come up in our conversations with our mentees could be things that we want to go away and think about or do some work around. And I've had a fantastic example of this, where one of our very senior leaders shared that one of his junior women partners came to him and flagged that the women partners seemed to be doing a lot more of the office housekeeping, as we refer to it. So things like organizing and arranging and general administration. And he didn't think that was the case. So he spent about a month being really intentional and actually looking who was doing what around the office. And lo and behold, she was completely right. So he then got his leadership team together and said, look, it's not working right. You know, this shouldn't be happening. What do we do about it to make sure the work is evenly distributed? And the reason why I really like this example is because he didn't go into it going, oh, well, if she said it, it must be true. Or, well, that meets my perception, so yes, I'll do something about it. He went into it with genuine curiosity, even though it didn't match with his perception, and came to realize that his perception was inaccurate, and then took action because of it. So within all of your teams or within your organization or functions or divisions, there is that opportunity for you to potentially test out some of the things that you're hearing from your mentee. You don't need to make them about your mentee, but you might be hearing things that lead you to go, I wonder if that's happening in my team, or I wonder if that's happening in the wider organization. And then take these back to a broader group. So it could be something you do in your team, but you then roll out more broadly across the organization. And so that is about using your influence at the leadership table. So the opportunity you have both within your fellow leaders to show them how they can be more inclusive, the impact of mentoring across difference, as well as how you can drive change. One of the things I would also encourage people to do is to really seek out opportunities to advocate. And this could be both for an individual or for wider groups. And so this is really looking at, where would this different view or perspective that you have learned through your journey with your mentee be useful for the wider organization. And it could be something that they've talked about, or that they're interested in, that's really struck you as being potentially quite impactful. So the conversation could go something like, as you know, I'm mentoring Annabelle, and I've been really impressed by the way she talks about growing the customer demographics, customer relationships in her demographic. Why don't we bring her and some of the other women at her level onto our customer task force so that we've got that perspective? So you're not saying Annabelle needs to do this job, or you're not saying we don't have any women. You are demonstrating quite clearly the positive business impact of greater diversity, of greater inclusion, and also highlighting the fact that Annabelle, your mentee, has given you this idea and shared some really interesting insights. So you both highlight and elevate her, as well as building a business opportunity. So I'm going to stop there. I would love to know your thoughts, reflections, reactions, or any experiences that you have that you'd like to share.
Well, thank you so much, Jane, for such a rich and insightful presentation. And now we would like to open the floor for questions. So please feel free to type your question into the Q&A box on the chat, and we'll get to as many as time allows. So go ahead. Any questions about the presentation? Or if you want to speak, it's a possibility as well. Just let us know, raise your hand.
I'm just going to pop into the chat box the link for the TED Talk in case anybody would like to check that out. Oh, I think I've only got the hosts and panelists up. Helene, can we open this to the group?
So let me check. Can you put it in the chat?
Sorry?
Can you put the link in the chat?
I can. My chat only goes to you, I think, bro.
No, you can put it in the chat and then I can share it with everyone. You have to. Yes, exactly.
Okay. Let me do that. So I'll share that. And I'll also, let me have a little bit of a look if I can find the link for the Harvard Implicit Associations tests, in case anybody would like to try those out.
Yeah. Yes, we can see your link now.
Just do a quick Google on that while we wait for any questions. So if you're not all that excited about watching my Google skills, then please pop something into the chat for us.
I think we had a question about cross-cultural differences from Al Chan. So I don't know if you have any insight on that. Yes.
I don't see a question about that.
So it's in the webinar chat, we have cross-cultural differences. So maybe it's just a reflection or an insight regarding the presentation about cross-cultural differences.
I think that came up, and Al, please jump in if you'd like to. I think that came up when we were talking about some of the challenges. And I would say absolutely. I think it comes up across multiple aspects. It can come up about, the expectation of mentors and that mentoring relationship. It touches on communication, it touches on bias, it touches on context, so many different things. And it can be so enriching, I think, for a leader to have those kind of opportunities to experience the organization or get some insights into what that experience looks like for somebody who has a different cultural background, how to work out the differences. Al's just mentioned how to work out the differences. Mentors and mentees may not have the same level of expectation due to that. You're absolutely right. And I think it comes to the early framing of what the relationship will look like, what good looks like. I tend to have a very informal approach. I am from New Zealand. We are typically very informal, whereas I know for some people, they expect at my level of seniority, it would be much more of a formal relationship. So much as I can say those things, and I do tell them that, it is often over the course of time where I demonstrate what it looks like. That shows, I suppose, I walk the talk in that regard. And it can also just be helpful to make sure that we're listening. So it goes back to that authority, humility piece. we will bring to the table what they've told us they want. But some of the humility is going, actually, I'm not sure if this is landing in the way that would be most helpful to you. Let's talk about that. Or I'm not sure if we have quite the same understanding of where we're going here. And that's absolutely no failing on your part. It's no failing or error on the part of your mentee. It is just about, how do we work through these things? And I think particularly where we have mentors who are really quite attuned and culturally aware or culturally sensitive, they may be more in tune to this than the mentee might be. So you might be taking your mentee on a little bit of a journey about how impactful this can be as well. Thank you so much for that, Al.
We have a question from Abdeladem: how to advocate for individual and group in a toxic corporate culture?
Sorry, Helene, I didn't hear that.
It's in the Q&A box. So we have a question for
There
Abdeladem.
we go.
Yes.
How to advocate for individual and groups in toxic culture. Toxic corporate culture. It's a tough one. And I think it's a tricky balance. My main comment would be, first, do no harm. So what you don't want to be doing is putting your mentee or an underrepresented group in the line of fire. I would say look for allies. Where can you gather the resources and gather, the leadership cohort who are genuinely supportive to say, hey, I think we need to fix this. And it can be taking that responsibility into your own team. It could be about saying, look, I do think this is an issue. Let me test some things out within my own part of the business and see if it works. I think also it is about, to the extent that you can and to the extent that feels appropriate, sharing back or reflecting back to the individual or the group that you recognize the organization isn't hitting the mark. There are areas that you could do better. And generally where I hear toxic, I think about leadership behaviors. I think about, we genuinely hold people accountable, and that's at all levels, at junior levels as well as at senior levels. And how do we address bad behavior? How do we address things that don't align to our values? And that, I think, is a leadership conversation. It's something that kind of moves a lot beyond an individual or a group and very much goes to the heart of, who are we? What does it mean to lead? So I think the mentoring relationship can give you some wonderful insights, difficult though they might be, that will help steer that conversation for you. But I would actually probably take it a step away from an individual or from a group and make it much more about the culture of the organization and how you want to address that. So moving on to your second question around how to have a leadership buy-in and role modeling to implement a mentoring program inside an organization. I would say that's something that I think is quite challenging, because mentoring programs are a lot of work, and they're one of the areas which I find it probably, from a programmatic perspective, they are more challenging than sponsorship programs and more challenging than developmental coaching programs. And that's because trying to match mentors and mentees can be a real challenge. I would start small, and it could be, if you have, for example, an affinity network, like a women's affinity network or a Black affinity network, you might want to start with a particular group to begin with as a pilot. So starting small generally generates less concern, is less triggering for people than thinking the whole organization is going to dive into it. There are also some great tools, and AI is playing a fantastic role now, that can be used for matching and that can carry some of the burden, particularly if resources are slim and you're wanting to roll something out to quite a wide group. So there can be different approaches to how you go about it. And I think there's always the opportunity to encourage individual mentoring, or it could be a conversation that happens, just for each leader. Is every leader mentoring somebody, and how different are they? Are they mentoring somebody from a different race or a different gender, for example? And start with that, if that's the way to get it off the ground.
Good, thank you.
I hope that helps.
Any other questions? So maybe we can wrap up the session. Before we close, I want to thank Jane Ayaduray for sharing her insights on how inclusive leadership can drive meaningful change within organizations. Her experience, practical strategies, and clear passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion have given us all something valuable to take away, whether in your roles as mentors, leaders, or colleagues committed to making a difference. Thank you again, Jane, for being with us today, and thank you to everyone who joined. We hope you found the session meaningful and inspiring. This webinar was recorded, and we'll send you the link shortly. Be sure to visit mentoringcenter.org to learn more about our programs, events, and how you can get involved. Until next time, we wish you continued growth and success in your leadership and mentoring journey. Take care and have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jane. Thank you. Bye-bye.